It was a gun.
I'm not voting.
If we want to build our nation.
The problem with the Somalians.
Just want to experience something else than a black man.
Move on, move
Can't be like
forward.
a horse with blinkers on.
Honestly say, I was about to have
Corrupt
sex and then I pulled
crap,
up.
but it's nice.
Hi there, my name is Ibrahim Oosthuizen. I'm from Lansdowne, Cape Town, South Africa.
My name is Benjamin. My surname is Blom. I'm from Khayelitsha in Cape Town.
Hi, I'm Chantal. I'm originally from Pretoria, but I'm studying in Cape Town.
Hi, I'm Simeon and I'm from Takai in Cape Town.
Olani Ngobeni is from home, Mpumalanga, and I'm residing in the most famous Khayelitsha.
I am Zizi Pondlwana, originally from the Eastern Cape. I live in Cape Town and I work at the Peninsula University of Technology.
At first, when they said it's a 1% hike, we all thought, okay, it's all sort of done and easy. Until, you start seeing how huge that 1%, what the huge difference, and then on the reality of the 1% on the actual money that you used to have. Even if you were to go to the likes of Pick n Pay or buy something, that 14%, it was easy to calculate and say, okay, it's fine, it's 17 rand that it's being taken for VAT. But now when you still buy the very same thing at the very same price and check 23 rand, did that 1% make such a huge difference? That's where I started feeling and seeing that the 1% was not just any 1%, and okay, fortunately, after that 1%, they still gave us lists of things that we're still not receiving VAT and stuff like that, which was a surprise. We were never told. But I think it was because of the cry and yeah.
Well, it's kind of weird for me because you probably found out by reading about it or hearing about it on the news. But here I am, every month I get an allowance from my parents. Here I am spending the same money on the same grocery list that I've always had, and it's just maybe like 20 rand more. And it's like, where's this 20 rand coming from? But it's because bread isn't 10 rand anymore, it's 13 or 12, and everything is just slightly more expensive. You don't really notice it, but collectively you do, and I just think that's how it's affected me, is that it's chowing on my pocket money.
I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for us as students. We don't work, and it really has a huge impact on us because, lucky for you, you have an allowance, but I don't. And every bit of money that I have to use it wisely. And going to a grocery store and spending it on things that I need, and those are essentials. And finding it that I don't have much, but I still have to pay much for whatever, or for the very little that I have. So it really has had a lot of impact in a very negative way to us as students. And with the sugar tax as well, it's been very, very, it hasn't worked in our favor.
For me, I'm kind of like at the stage in my life where I'm transcending between student and working class, and also with as in marriage and so on and things. So for So for me, it's like there's certain things I never took note of before that obviously I'm forced to take note of now. Do you get me? And if you just look at paying things like eventually I'm going to need to pay a bond, eventually I'm going to need to buy a house, eventually I'm going to need to support a family, eventually. So if I just consider my religion, for example, the male usually he provides for the female, so I'm not only paying my tax now. Do you get me? There's someone else's tax as well, if you get it. Your woman, she'll obviously do what she can, where she wants to, or she aids, but in my religion, it's a man's duty to do that. Do you understand that? So I'm not paying not at 1%, but it might be like a 2% tax, if you get me.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm learning about these percentage, the percentages VAT that is now put on this, but before I even entered into, say, the real world, you're already frightened by these prices of, this is going to increase, that is going to, the 1% is this. By the time we probably are able to afford a house or are able to put some deposit down, what is going to be like 19% or something?
The 14% has been there for what? More than 10 years, I think. And then, last year, if I take for myself, everything was for me. Every cent I had, I spent it the way I want. Now, this year, there's an increase, and I'm starting to have responsibilities. It's a bit not easy to settle down and understand now, okay, usually I would be month end, I still have 3,000 rand maybe in my account. Now I have 30 rand. It just doesn't make sense. You still sit down, try to calculate and find out what happened, what did I do wrong and stuff like that. So that's where it also had a very, very huge impact. to some people, maybe the elites didn't see and feel it, but I mean, especially as in the ground level, we feel it very, 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 very much. I mean, I don't want to lie, we feel it very much. And we were hoping and expecting maybe when they mentioned this VAT hike, it would only affect a certain group of people, but unfortunately it had to affect everyone, which is we're the ones feeling it the most. And even there are those that, like he mentioned, he's still a student. He has to find means and try to get, I mean, the little that he gets, he still gets that VAT. It still affects him, you know. If only maybe probably it could have been bracketed to a certain group, or if I may put it that, to a certain tax level, if I may put it that way, you know, it might have we might have not maybe felt it that much. I think that's the whole thing. That's why we're feeling it very hardly.
That's a very good point, mentioning that it's really affected people at the ground level. If you look at a typical example of my mom that sweeps street for a living and she gets a salary of 3,000 rands, from that 3,000 rand, she has to pay tax. And that is going to indirectly or directly affect me as her child, because obviously I get money from her. And you can imagine that from the little that she has, so she still has to give me money. And from the little that I have, I still need to pay tax from that. And you would hope that for someone that is like myself, that's a student, and like you, Ibrahim, I'm progressing, or rather I'm transitioning from a student to a working class, that obviously I'll be doing my internship, and from that little that I might get, because I mean you can get from as little as 500 rand from your internship, and even if I'm going to receive that, I'm still going to be obliged to pay tax, and it's really, really going to be a pain in my neck, more than anything else.
I think it's really clear. I mean, I'm right on the other side, because I was a student and now I'm kind of working, I guess. And
Wow.
and I see two big things. And I think when the Fees Must Fall protest started, the principle behind it was really quite correct. And there was money in the fiscus to have paid for that at the time. But then you have to go back and look at who was in charge. And you had people like Nene, Pravin Gordhan, people of integrity. And then they were substituted by people who lacked that kind of level of integrity. And the fiscus started leaking very badly, as we know, because we can see what's happened. And because of the inefficiencies and the problems we had, and still have, I think, in government, then you have this situation where people have to pay. And you're quite right with your mother, okay? It's a tragic situation where poor people have to be put in this position. But the other end is, I run a budget which is responsible for thousands of people. And what you're finding now is additional VAT on equipment, services, and all that sort of thing. And the very people who should be recipients of benefiting from a worthy budget are getting less and less because we can't afford to pay more because the VAT has gone up. So there's some really direct implications to the quality of education students are getting, because in effect the budgets are being constrained by the increase in VAT. So everybody suffers, and it's not a great thing.
I'm just thinking about, even if you look at it from a business perspective, where things now change to 15%. So automatically, let's say this generation or whoever wants to start now is already starting 1% behind. There's an increase in everything already. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you could have maybe been planning on, let's just say, just before the actual 1% increase. All of a sudden, things change, they rearrange, and certain agreements might have been in place that are now not anymore in place because of a 1%.
I think it's very important to understand that it's not only the government. I'm not advocating for the government. Yes, they played a very big part in actually putting us in the position that we are in. But there's other factors at play here. Private sector, illicit financial flows. There's a whole lot of things that we can mention. But since we are on the government now, there was right now, that's what should be happening. We should be actually building our societies, especially empowering those that have been previously disadvantaged, still living in poverty now, in areas that have very high crime. You mentioned earlier on how the most impacted are the people at the bottom of the food chain. And to think that we have a government that should be redressing those ills is actually the one at the forefront of actually putting us at the rear end It's so bad. Because for me, as a young working person, I mean, I come from the rural areas of Transkei, whereby we just got running water about 4 or 5 years ago. Still, it's in the streets. We can't get it into the house because of certain laws and all that kind of stuff. We started having electricity over the last 4 years or something like that. So we can imagine the need that we have upon ourselves, because government is not doing much, that we have to do the impact that we have and that we have to make and the role we have to play in our own communities where we come from. But then again, we have communities that we live within now when we are here, where we're working. So where, when, and where, and how do we get to really develop ourselves while we live with our families and the communities that raised us in the state that they are in?
You just reminded me, when this thing was still implemented, there was an article I think that went out on Mail and Guardian. I'm not very sure of the newspaper, there where they say there will be that hike. However, there's those what they still call basic needs, yeah, where they include your food like your maize meal, your beans. There was a couple of, but sugar was no longer one of them. It used to be one of them, but it's no longer one of them because now they had to tax sugar. So it was one of those basic things, which peculiarly, if you were to go to a supermarket, believe you me, they still tax you. They still tax that 15% on the very thing. However, the government has released and say these things has not been taxed for the past how many years? On the very 14% that was, which was still shocking for me, and like, I'm used to being taxed for these things and stuff like that. So, meaning, even though they still think, they'll say, no, but we still thought of the people on the bottom of the chain, which is when you go into the business side of it, when you go to the supermarkets, for them it's all about profit. For them it's not about, it's about, okay, so if we're getting this thing cheaper, when the government says they're not charging us, the very person that is in need of this thing doesn't know that they're not supposed to be charged this thing, VAT on this thing. And if probably they were to be audited, they would still keep it on the receipt as zero, as not taxed. But if you were to go into detail, we are actually taxed on that very thing. So it's still not benefiting us at all.
My dream is for people to be less selfish in this world.
My dream is to be a successful entrepreneur and a humanitarian. I think for a young man that grew up in Khaeditch, I want to eradicate poverty. And for me to do that, I need to create opportunities in society. And I also understand that people have a lot of trauma, they carry a lot of systematic trauma in them, and it's my duty as a humanitarian to try and make a difference in society. I think there's a very vital need for that.
My dream is just to be financially free.
So my dream was and could be to climb Everest, because you go and see amazing places and do amazing things. But to do that, you need to be enabled. And because I'm an educator, I think, the importance of enabling people. But we need to enable people in the new technological era, which we're moving into, because that's the world you're living in. And by doing that, we can empower people to go forwards. You can't put the empowerment before the enabling. We've got to enable people with the skills, the knowledge, and the abilities and confidence so that they can become empowered.
My dream is to do away with the system or the style of education we're being educated.
My dream is for the nation to do away with the lie or the BS of the Rainbow Nation. That's just nonsense.
Yazi, you should ever sit and talk with people, or else take a walk and create a straight talk. Talk what is nice, it will make you feel stronger. Listen what is right and say what is wrong. You should ever sit and talk with people, or else take a walk and create a straight talk. Talk what is nice, it will make you feel stronger. Listen what is right and say what is wrong.